Hey everyone, and welcome to the Christians in Aviation Conference. Um, I know this is after lunch and everybody's getting ready to go home, but if I can, try and hold your attention for 15 more minutes. I'd like to talk to you about the FAA's lack of oversight during the 737 MAX certification process and how it led to two crashes and the litigation that ensued from that. Today we're going to go over what is the FAA ODA, what is the MCAS on the Boeing 737 MAX, the lawsuits and trials that have come about since the crashes. We're going to have a biblical integration and practical recommendations for the aviation professional. The FAA launched the ODA, which is the Organization Designation Authorization, in 2005. What a mouthful. This program gives the FAA the ability to delegate certification authority to certain manufacturers that it determines as designees. This authority will allow the manufacturer to certify any part of the certification process for which they're authorized, whether it be production, design, engineering, or final certification. The FAA did this to try and streamline the certification process and increase cycle times by relying on industry leaders and subject matter experts at the organization itself, so that the FAA can focus on newer and more novel technology. Some manufacturers like Boeing are allowed to certify from design all the way through to certification, and they are able to, what we quote unquote are able to do, is self-certify. The 737 MAX was first launched into the market in 2017 as a direct competitor to the Airbus Neo. Boeing wanted to stay as close to the original type design as they could, so that they wouldn't have to certify the MAX as a new aircraft. It had larger, more fuel-efficient engines, so they had to relocate the engines further forward and higher up on the pylon than previous versions, which increased the aircraft's angle of attack. To increase that, or to counteract and combat the increased angle of attack, or AOA, Boeing designed the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, which is the MCAS as we all infamously know it. Boeing also marketed this aircraft as the same time-tested 737 that you're used to. The MCAS was able to counter the increased angle of attack by preventing aerodynamic stalls. The system gathers data from a single AOA sensor on the aircraft's fuselage. Now, it does not cross-reference the data from one sensor to the other, so it only reads data from one. And you'll see how that plays into this in a minute. When the MCAS senses an impending stall, it pushes the nose of the aircraft down. So, in the event where one of the AOA sensors malfunctions, the aircraft's nose gets pushed down by the MCAS because it thinks it's in a stall, but it's really not. By design of the engineers, the MCAS could not be overridden by control inputs made by the pilots. The system was never disclosed to the pilots or mentioned in the flight manual of the aircraft, and this is what happened in 2018 and 2019 and killed 346 people between the Ethiopian Airlines and Lion Air crashes. Since the MCAS was not able to be overridden, as the pilots are pulling back, the MCAS is still sensing an impending stall and trying to push the aircraft down to pitch down, and It was basically controlled flight into terrain. Now, how does this all tie in together? Since Boeing was not type certificating a new aircraft and they had ODA delegation, they were able to self-certify the MAX without disclosing the inclusion of the MCAS to the FAA. This is what people called the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history. The FAA has since stated that they will increase oversight at Boeing while they see Boeing through a safety culture and management change. In 2018, the FAA doubled down its stance regarding the ODA. They still want to continue focusing on newer and more novel technology. And because of these incidents or accidents in 2018 and 2019, the ODA office was realigned to the the Associate Director of Aviation Safety to better align their prioritization of safety and consistency. Now, Boeing's viewpoint through all of this was not not the greatest. After the first crash, Boeing maintained their view that the 737 MAX was as safe as any airplane that has ever flown the skies. In fact, Boeing even went on record as saying that. After the first crash, they did have their own suspicion that MCAS was possibly at fault, but they stayed quiet and were fairly satisfied that the initial reports stated that a bird strike to the AOA sensor caused the faulty indication and that pilot error was involved, and that's what drove the aircraft into the ground. And all of this also stemmed from Boeing and its customers like Southwest wanted to keep with that original type design to cut costs. It cuts costs for Boeing, it cuts costs for the manufacturers. Boeing didn't have to print new manuals, the airlines didn't have to train new pilots. The families' viewpoints of the victims, again, called it the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history. They call it on the courts to hold Boeing accountable. They feel that Boeing has pled out way too many of the charges that were brought against them, and feel that these sweetheart deals will end up failing to hold Boeing truly accountable, while Boeing just pays billions in fines. And so far, more than 90% of the claims to the families have been settled. The pilots' viewpoints, of course, they feel that Boeing had put them in an unsafe aircraft. They felt like they were unprepared for any event in which the MCAS would have malfunctioned. They would not have known what to do. They felt like the incidents of 2018 and 2019 would have happened to them. All because Boeing had neglected to disclose that information they needed to safely operate their aircraft. Boeing burnt up a lot of trust with the pilots. Some of the ensuing litigation from the pilots, Southwest Airlines Pilots Association, which is the union for Southwest Airlines, sued Boeing for $115 million in lost wages on the basis of misleading and false representation. Boeing claimed that the 737 MAX was the same aircraft that they were used to, and it was not. The lawsuit was originally dismissed, but later overturned. It will be a Texas Supreme Court has decided to hear this case, and a date has not been set yet for hearing. Sorry. There was an anonymous group of pilots of 5,000 pilots claiming $360 million in lost wages and damages who filed anonymously against Boeing. Judge Stephen Seeger out of Illinois um, had originally told the pilots, if you didn't come forward and put your name on record, that he would throw the case out of court, which of course he eventually did, even after they gave up their anonymity. He said that they were trying to capitalize on other people's experiences as trauma and trying to stretch the bounds of liability way too far to people who had nothing to do with the crashes. And of course, the families versus Boeing. Like I said earlier, 90% of the claims have been settled out of the court. There is a class action lawsuit going on right now where a few of the families are challenging the court statements or court settlements, stating that they did not have a say in the negotiation process. The U.S. Department of Justice originally agreed that they would not prosecute Boeing criminally if they paid compensation to the families and increased oversight and paid fines. And of course, this class action lawsuit is wanting Boeing to pay $25 billion in fines, which is what leads us to the United States Department of Justice versus Boeing, which trial is set to open next month in June of 2025. At this time, Boeing has already paid over $2.5 billion in damages. Boeing has pled not guilty so far, and this is on one count of conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government. My recommendations for Boeing is be more transparent in your business dealings. Build your credibility with your customers again so that they will be able to trust you. Hold yourself accountable to your actions. If it takes pleading guilty, during the trial next month, do what it takes to build that transparency and credibility and increase oversight. This whole FAA ODA program leaves me wanting for more oversight. I feel like any manufacturer that is able to self-certify from cradle to grave their aircraft, it's a recipe for disaster, as we've seen. The biblical integration that I've got for you is Proverbs 11:3. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. And what this means is, have integrity. Don't lie, don't cheat. In your business dealings, be truthful, be honest. I believe that no matter what walk of life you come from, whatever industry you're in, this verse can guide you. How can we prevent this from reoccurring? One thing that I've seen that does work in high performance work organizations are call points. Whatever your governing body is, in this case during the certification process, it would be the FAA. During certain stages of the aircraft's design and engineering, production, and certification, you would have predetermined call points where you would bring your FAA inspector in and let them oversee certain steps and buy off on the process. And I have seen this work, and it definitely had long-term lasting effects to correct quality control issues. And, over time, once this does start working, you can scale back on it later on. But I believe that this is almost mandatory at this point for Boeing. A new safety management system. SMSs are vital to the aviation industry for employers and employees alike. I think Boeing really needs an overhaul on their safety culture, where they prioritize safety over profits, where they decide that they want to be proactive, not reactive, and they need to be able to cultivate a work culture where safety thrives and is not compromised. We've always heard it say where, aviation is regulated by counting tombstones. I've said it once, I've said it 100 times throughout my time in school. I want to see that changed at some point. I want the aviation industry as a whole to become proactive instead of reactive. I know that it's human nature, but I believe that, working across the entire industry, it can be obtained. And in conclusion, the two 737 MAX crashes highlighted the lack of FAA oversight during the aircraft certification process. While relying upon the strengths of the manufacturers to be able to self-certify has proven to be an issue with tragic consequences, it also showed that there is room for change and growth in the aviation industry. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you all have safe travels home.